In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop to make album designs and photo collages using guides and masks. So let's make a new Photoshop document. And I'm going to type in a custom size. I'm going to pretend that I'm designing pages for an album that is 11 by 14 inches. So the width is 14. The height is 11. The resolution here, I'm going to put at 300. That's pixels per square inch. That's a high quality for most professional printing companies. They like to have 300. Now I'm going to be making a page spread. So that's 2 pages in one, left and right. So that means I need to just double the width to 28, but the height is still the same. So I'm going to click Create. Okay. Now with my zoom tool selected, which is the letter Z, I'm going to hit Fit Screen, just to use the most out of my screen possible, and actually I can get a little bit more room out of this. I want to set my first guide right down the middle so I know where the crease is, or the division between 2 pages. So to do that, I can turn on my rulers by doing Control R, and if it's not already in percentage mode, you can right click on the horizontal ruler or the vertical ruler and select what mode you want it to be in. We got pixels, inches. If you're doing measurement type stuff, I like percent when I'm setting up my basic guide. So here's my 50% guide vertically. Now to make a guide, I'm going to switch to my cursor tool, which is V, or your move tool, and just click on the actual ruler over here and drag over. Now I'm making a guide at my 50% point. You can also hold Shift to make exact numbers without any decimal point. But it looks like it snaps right onto 50 for me. If it doesn't, hold Shift for you. Let go right there. So that's our divider right there. Now you want to set up your safe zones. Now this really depends on the company you're using, and of course the specifications that they should be providing you if you're making an album. A lot of printing companies will actually provide a Photoshop file that has an overlay with all the zones actually coded and colored, and so you can know where to keep your images so that they don't get cut off or cropped. But for this example, album spread, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch margin all around. So I need to switch this to inches. So right click, switch to inches, click up here and drag down, and I'm going to hold Shift so it's sticking onto the kind of the grid of the ruler. There we go, 0.5, click over here, 0.5, over here, 0.5, and this is really just a visual guide for you to make sure that nothing important goes outside this boundary, because there's a risk of it getting cut or cropped when you print, and really you don't want to have anything too important that far out on the edge. So this just kind of makes sure that you keep the important stuff within the body of the page. So let's look at this page over here. I'm just going to zoom in with Z right there. Now let's say that I want to have images laid out in a certain way. I'm going to drop in 3 images, and I'm going to show you a real easy way to arrange them. Now when you begin designing your collage or your album, you want to obviously have a plan in mind. You want to have a layout decided on. And you can find hundreds of resources online for different photo layouts. You just look up photo collage layout, photo album, photo book layout, things like that. Even magazine layout ideas can inspire you to give some interesting, arrangements of shapes and orientations of the photos. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to drop in 3 photos, and I'm going to do a basic arrangement. Then I'll show you some more advanced tricks that use guides to help you snap things perfectly in place and get good spacing between photos. Okay, we've got our 3 images here. I've got a vertical photo and 2 horizontal photos. And on this left page, I'm going to do a very basic arrangement of the vertical photo on the far left, and then next to that on the right, the 2 horizontal photos stacked on top of each other. And I'm going to fill up the entire space of the page. That may be the look you're going for. You may want borders, you may want gaps, you may want some creative brushstrokes in the middle. That's up to you, and that would probably be a different video, but let's get this arrangement started. So you may have noticed I got rid of my ruler, which is Control R. I don't need it right now, so I'm going to get rid of it. You may notice that these objects will snap onto the guides as well as the edge of the canvas. Make sure to go to View, turn on Snap, and make sure that these are checked. Guides, Layers, and Document Bounds. Perfect. When I want to fill a space, the easiest way that I found is to grab the top control point, drag it up, let it snap right there. Drag the bottom control point, let it snap down right there. With this arrangement, I want another guide to be in the middle of just this page. So I'm going to turn my rulers back on. I don't want inches, so let's switch over to percent. And I want it at 25% because that's the middle of this left page. So there, it's not quite snapping, so I'm going to hold Shift. There we go, 25%. Okay, so now I know that this photo needs to come over a little bit if I want to stick to, symmetry and things like that. So let's grab these other photos and put them in place. So I want this one down here, and it's going to snap to that center line. Drag the right control point to the center of the spread. Move it up. There we go. Hit enter to get out of transform mode. It's very important. Grab the other one over here. Snap right there. Snap right there. Okay, so these are fitting within the page, but there's gaps in between and on the top of these photos. So how do we fix that and fill all the space with these two photos? Well, we're going to need to make another middle guide for this direction right here. So 50% horizontally. Okay, now we know where the middle is. So I'm going to drag this down there and drag this one up there. And now from there, I'm going to expand them downwards like so. And this one up like that. Now this is overlapping this photo over here. I don't like this overlap. Now that's because this layer of image 231 is on top, and it doesn't need to be on top. And actually I want it to go underneath and be hidden by this dark brick photo over here. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so we're almost done. We do have some overhang over here, so we're going to use masking to get rid of that. So let's make a rectangular selection. You can find your selection tools over here, rectangle marquee tool, and just select this gap we don't want filled with anything. And again, it snaps onto this guide, so it makes it very easy. You don't have to do meticulous work. With this selection made, we're going to select this top photo of her leaning on this wood railing. Click the mask button down here. Turns your selection into a mask. But look, it's actually opposite. We want this to be masked out and this to be masked in. So with our mask selected, which it automatically is, just do Control I, and there we go. So make your selection again, right there. It snaps onto the guide. Select that bottom layer, click on the Make Mask button, and with the mask still selected over here on the right, press Control I, and you get it masked out, and it's perfect. Now, what if you want to have borders? There's two ways you can do it. You can cheat if you want a pure white background or a black background or a solid color. You can cheat by just making a top layer and actually drawing the borders yourself with a square brush. Seems kind of silly, but it saves you a bit of meticulous work. So I'm going to decide on the thickness of my border right now. And I'm going to click once, hold shift, and draw down. When you hold shift, look, even though my mouse is wiggling around, it stays perfectly straight. Also, brushes can snap onto guides, the two, so that's nice. So now I'm going to click over here, one click, hold shift, and drag out. And there you go. You can get rid of guides by pressing Control and semicolon, brings them on and off. It's the same thing as going to View and Show Guides. See right here's a keyboard shortcut for that. There we go. So we've got a white border, which is actually just a top layer. The more complicated way to do it would be with masking. So if you have background textures or background images, you're going to want to do this in a more thorough way, which would be properly masking the edges of the photo out by making a selection where you want the photo to remain, like so. Now for these, they already have a mask. We need to apply this and then do the same smaller selection so we can get the area that we want. But first you have to rasterize these layers because you cannot apply a mask to a smart object. So I rasterized it so it's just a pixel layer now. It's destructive. Right click on the mask and do apply. Right click and apply. There we go. Now we can draw our smaller square, which we want basically to make kind of an inner frame. And there, make mask, click on the next layer, draw your rectangle here. Now I'm doing it by eye, which is not ideal. Normally you're going to want to use guides to make these selections perfect. So there we go. This is the more thorough way to do it. And if we had a background image, not a great example, but let me throw an image behind here just so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So if we had some kind of background image behind it, we can see through because we actually used masking to basically shrink the borders. So let's move on to a little bit more advanced, which is using more guides and letting Photoshop do the hard work for us. All right, in this next example, I'm going to show you how to use guides to make a layout with gutters and safe areas, and we're going to use those guides to snap our photos in place. So I'm going to make a new document, and I'm going to make it 6 inches by 8 inches high with 300 dpi. Now I did a little bit of math and I know what I'm going for with this layout, so that's why I picked those numbers. Again, having a plan, having a visual guide to go by will really help you save time. If you just go in without a plan, you're probably going to be wasting a lot of time. So let's make some guides. So go up to View, and new guide layout. This is a really cool tool within Photoshop that I've honestly never seen anyone ever use or teach about. So here you are learning it from me. I found it the hard way. We're going to turn on columns, and look, it automatically makes guides. A guide is an invisible line that is not visual in the export. It's not going to actually be there, but it's just a guide to help you, align things. You can snap things to it, and it makes life so much easier. So we can put in our number of columns. I'm going to do 2. I want 2 vertical columns, and if you check rows, I'm going to do 4 because I have 8 images I'm going to put in here. Make a nice collage, and down here we have the gutter. So the gutter is a gap in between, the columns or in between the rows. So I'm going to put in 2 and 2. Now that looks pretty good, but you can tell the spacing here is wider than the space vertically. That's because the numbers are different. So if you really want to get technical, you can probably do some math to fix that. Maybe 1, it's still a little, now it's too narrow, maybe 1.5. That looks like a perfect square in the middle, so I'm happy with that. Now let's turn on the margin tool. This is really cool because this makes what I mentioned earlier, what I call safe areas around the edge, to make sure nothing hits the edge of our canvas. So just to make things look cleaner, I'm going to type in 2, tab 2, tab 2, tab 2. Let's see what that looks like. It looks pretty good, although vertically on the top there's more space on the top. So maybe for the top, let's try 1.5 like we did earlier, and then bottom 1.5. Yeah, it looks good. I like things to be symmetrical and not stretched or rectangular. So that looks great. Oh, and look at this. You can even make a preset. There's some presets already there. So if you do the same kind of collage often with these specific details, you want to reuse it, save the preset, and save yourself a lot of time. Okay, so we've made our guides. Let's drop in some photos and start making our collage. Okay, I've got my 8 images here, and I'm going to resize them together by clicking on the first layer, holding Shift, clicking on the last layer. My natural instinct tells me to grab the corner and to size it up to the guides, but for some reason when you do corner resizing, it won't snap onto guides, so you need to use an actual side control point. So it snaps onto the guides. That is good. Let's grab the other side and snap it right there. Oops, right there. Awesome. Now I can move these all up. Now remember, I'm controlling all the layers together. They're just on top of each other for now. We're going to fix that in a minute. So there we go. It snapped to these guys. I'm going to hit enter. Now let's zoom in and see what it actually did. Z for zoom, and I'm going to click and drag. Look at that. Perfectly to the pixel lined up. That would have taken me a lot of time. And times 8, that's time I don't want to be wasting. And up here, it snapped along this vertical guide. But look, the image is a little taller than this section we made. So we can use masking to fix that. Or if they're all equally sized, then you can just leave it and make sure you snap to these bottom corners and everything will look uniform. That's the key to collages, is you want everything to be uniform and symmetrical. Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's start arranging our photos. Let's click on the second layer here. Drag and hold Shift and snap. There we go. Awesome. This one moves straight down. I'm holding Shift. And I'm looking at this bottom center corner. That's the one that I'm snapping based on. And there. Oops. I'm using a stylus, so sometimes when I let go, it jumps a little bit. Nope. There we go. Now these are not in any particular order. When you make a collage like this, you definitely want to have some kind of sense to it, so that it actually makes sense. And there. And it looks like I have an extra, okay, so I arranged the photos. Now, as you can see, these photos do go outside the guide a little bit. This one doesn't, for some reason. Look at that, because I didn't snap on that bottom corner. Let's fix that. So that's the second to last layer. Just move it up, and you'll see it turns purple. The guides turn purple when they snap. And that's awesome. Now, all these images are extending above the top guide the same amount. So I could just leave this here. I'm going to turn off the guides by doing Control semicolon. I could just leave this. No one's going to know anything's wrong. But if you have images that are different sizes, like say you put a vertical photo in here and you need to zoom it in, but to fill up the space, we're going to use masking. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You can also recompose a photo to fix it. So let's make this one fill up more of the space better. So what I'm going to do is turn my guides back on by doing Control semicolon. Press M to get to our selection tool. For me, that gives me my rectangle selection or rectangle marquee tool. And I'm going to grab this area right here. And selections also snap to guides, which makes things so much easier. So now I've got this perfect rectangle selected. Let's make sure we got the right layer here. Is it this one? Yes, this one. Image 49. Now with my selection made and with the layer selected over here, see how it's highlighted, click the mask button, and look at that, it trimmed off that top piece because that's outside the mask. But now we can actually rearrange this photo, but first we have to unlink the mask and the layer. If this chain link is still there, look, if I move this, the mask moves with the image, which is great for most cases. But if I want to move the image around inside the mask, that's a problem. So unlink it. Now we can do this. We can zoom the image in. Let me put it back. We can zoom it in. If I hold Alt while resizing, it zooms in from the center. We can use the maximum amount of space. And if you're doing like a web collage that's going on Facebook, on mobile, you want to make sure your images are not very wide. Make sure your subject is filling up as much space as possible. That way you get the most visual impact out of your images. Like this one down here, I'll do the same thing. So M for marquee, grab this rectangular area, select the correct layer, which is this one, yep, image 38. With my marquee made, I'm going to hit the mask button down here, and now unlink it. There we go. Now click on the layer. You got to make sure the layer is selected. Now I can just basically do this. I'm resizing the image with the mask without changing the mask. So that looks great. I have found that posting collages like this is much more effective than posting one single image or a multi-photo post, because when someone looks at this, they can see multiple images without having to do anything. And also it's it's just more visually appealing. It's a lot to look at once. So don't make it too busy. Don't make the images too small, especially if it's going on mobile. But there you have it. I hope I just made making collages simpler and a lot more fun. Okay, in this last example, I'm going to show you how to add some style and character to the edges of a photo using paintbrush as well as masking on the photo. So I've got my 4 images here that have not been resized, and I've got a wood texture image on the bottom. So let's use Shift to select all these photos, V for Move Tool, which gives us the transform controls, and let's size it down because we're going to put them all next to each other horizontally. I'm just gonna guess, eyeball it right there. I think that should be fine. Click on the second image here. Here's a nice moving trick. If you left click and move the image to the right and hold Shift at the same time, it will move it perfectly horizontally. You can't move it up or down, only left and right, which is great if you want to keep things oriented to each other. Similarly, if you click and move it upwards first or downwards and hold Shift, it'll only move up and down. Basically the first direction you move. But I want to move this to the right, so hold Shift right there. Shift and right there. Okay, yeah, my spacing is way off. So I'm going to turn on my ruler with Control R, and I'm going to make a 50% guide right there, and a 20% guide there, and then a 75% guide right there. There we go. That's my 4 spacings. So let's line things up kind of in the middle. I'm going to use my arrows to space things out good. Move it over. It's a few pixels there, and there, and then this one. You usually don't want images right up against the edge, by the way. It looks much better, more professional, and visually appealing if there's a gap, all around the edges. That's another reason to make those kind of safe zones, is to make sure that if you're going for the style, to make sure that no image touches the actual edge of your canvas. Okay, so we got our images here. Now we're going to give them all masks. Just click on the image and click the mask button. You can tell by the preview the mask is pure white, which means the image is completely visible, nothing is being hidden. Now I'm going to use my brush tool, which is B. Right click to go to your brush settings to choose a preset, and I found that on Adobe's website they offer a really cool brush pack called Summer 2020 Update. Now I don't know if there's like a seasonal thing going on that I just didn't know about, if there'll be a fall brush set or what, but these are some really great textured, dirty brushes. So I'm going to just use this very first one. And if you look what happens, if I paint black over the image, it hides it because I'm painting on the mask. That's what happens when you paint on the mask, is if you're painting black, it makes it hide. White will bring it back. So look, let me go back to normal mode. If I click on the mask again, make sure you've selected the mask. If I paint white, it brings it back. So let's undo. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a scratchy paintbrush to basically paint away the edges of this photo. So let's zoom in a little bit. Make our brush size appropriate. Make sure you're painting with black if you want it to go away. And I'm just going to manually just kind of paint downwards. You may want to completely get rid of the hard edges of all your photos, so it's just kind of got like a torn paper look. Now this works because she's kind of a stylish cowgirl look going on. and it just kind of makes sense. Visually, this looks good to me. I'm going to click on the next images mask so I can paint on it. Remember, you always have to know what is selected before you paint or modify or select, because if you got the wrong layer selected, you're wasting your time. Third image, click on the mask over there on the right. You can paint here. You can make it as clean or as imperfect as you want. I was able to emulate a torn paper look. It looked very much like an actual scrapbook, because I gave it kind of a torn edge, and then I went back underneath the image layer. I drew another white layer with the torn paper brush that I found, and it looked like it was a scrapbook. It was really cool. Let's zoom back out, get rid of our guides. That looks really nice for this style, for this Texan with this wood background. I like the paintbrushy, kind of worn edges. Another final touch you can add is to make some shadows. So I'm going to make a blank layer underneath all 4 images, just one layer. Back to your brush tool, select a soft brush. I'm going to use this one because it's super soft. And with the color black selected, just do a big paint stroke behind each image. There we go. You can play with opacity, of course. You can move it around if you need to. You can also, procedurally generate shadows by going to layer styles, by double-clicking on the layer over here and checking drop shadow, and that looks good. But it probably uses more CPU power and it takes more time. So sometimes it's just funner and a little better in some ways to just paint it yourself. There you go. I hope you learned some good tricks from this video. Hope this inspired you and gave you some new ideas for either album design or collages or galleries or anything like that. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. That kind of encourages me and that people are actually watching and enjoying my stuff. And it's going to make sure that I'll make more content in the near future for all of you viewers out there. So thanks again, and I hope you return soon.